Hey guys, welcome to the Daily Word Bible Study, a plain and simple book by book, chapter by chapter, and verse by verse study through the entire Bible. Currently, we are in the prophecy of Hosea or Hosea, depending on how you want to pronounce it. This is a very interesting book. Now, I always say in reading it through every book of the Bible that every book of the Bible is interesting, even Leviticus, although Leviticus is not as interesting. And the reason why, by the way, since I opened this can of worms, the reason why Leviticus is not interesting is because its primary purpose was the kind of priest manual, the Israelites' priest manual. Okay, so a lot of the procedures and policies of the priesthood God outlined in Leviticus. But every book has its purpose, and every book explains its purpose. So therefore, every book is interesting in that respect. So, when I'm Hosea, you can say Hosea, is an interesting book because one, let me pull up the our map again, our timeline, so you kind of keep abreast of that. All of the writings of the prophets, okay, is a prophetic timeline to judgment, the second coming of Christ, okay, God's judgment on Israel. Now, this kind of takes place over a 100-year period of time, over a 100-year period, with the fall of the northern kingdoms versus, here we go, let's do this here, with the fall of the two kingdoms. Remember, Solomon's sons divided the kingdoms, the kingdom of Israel versus the kingdom of Judah. And so from this period of time here, kind of go back to this Bible time. Well, I'm not gonna. It's around 900. Around this time, where you at? By the way, this chart I'm using, I like the chart because it kind of gives you a timeline, some of the events, chronicling the books of the Bible. So around 931, right here, if you can see, 931 BC, the kingdom is divided. So this is right here, 931. From this point all the way until the Babylonian exile. Well, there's actually two judgments. One was, the first judgment would have been here. Let's go down to King Hosea, when the Assyrians took the kingdom of Israel, or the northern kingdoms, into captivities. Now that's important to us because this is where we are right around this time. Let's go back around where are we at? It's about 731. No, let me get it right here. Let's see, where are you at? Amos. Where's Hosea? We studied these books before. I don't know why I'm having a problem here locating Hosea, and it's probably right before me. Okay, so where are you at? Okay, so right around here is where Hosea, the last king, we saw this around 725, and then so the prophecy of the book of Hosea, which is here, 753. So about 20 years, 25 years or so, is the northern kingdoms, okay, will fall. And it's about 120 years before the Babylonian kingdom, okay? So with that, we are in chapter 2, excuse me, we are in chapter 2, and Hosea, God called him as a prophet, which is kind of funny to me because I'm going to kind of come out of this for a moment. Because I see sometimes people want to be prophets. Now, this is kind of a map. If you kind of look at this with the northern kingdoms here. So if you, but that's not the map I want too, though. Well, okay, it's sort of the New Testament map. I wanted the Old Testament map to kind of show you the kingdoms. But if you can look at Samaria, Samaria right here becomes the capital of the northern kingdoms. And then Judea is the southern kingdoms, okay? And so that, again, I want to kind of try to give some kind of picture of what is going on. The northern kingdoms, which also is Samaria, is the time of Hosea. Okay, the northern kingdoms. And so they fall first. They fall first. And so, you know, the period of the Old Testament, which we call the writings of the prophet. Now, keep in mind that there have always been prophets. God has always had a prophet to speak to his people. They acted as kind of the mouthpiece of God, spiritual advisors, giving the word of the Lord, the counsel of the Lord to the kings, to the leaders. Okay, but the writings of the prophet, that this group here, the timeline sort of is they begin to speak the prophetic timeline of the coming judgment. First, they're warning Israel to turn from their sins, and then they are prophesying what will happen to them because they won't turn from their sins. And then there is the prophecy of the restoration, in other words, God's future plans for the nation of Israel. And for us, that's important because God has some future plans for the nation of Israel. And let me just say, that did not come to pass in 1947 when Israel became a nation. We'll get into that later. So now let's get to chapter 3. Hosea, God tells Hosea to marry a promiscuous woman, a harlot, and then to have children by this harlot. So she has 3 children. So far, we had 3 children. One named Jezreel, and then the other one is called Not My People. And then remember the other one is called, what's the other one? Not My People. Jezreel is called one. One is No Compassion. So No Compassion, Not My People, and Jezreel were the 3 children. That was their actual name. Now the reason why God commanded Hosea to marry a harlot was to illustrate their unfaithfulness. To illustrate their unfaithfulness. As I said, you want to be a prophet. What is amazing to me is, well, there's a prophet. If you want to be a prophet, there's a prophet. You know, the true prophets of God, not these fake prophets you see today, but the true prophets of God. God would tell them to do some strange things. We're going to see some of them. I mean, just think about this. We read the book of Jonah when God told the prophet Jonah to go to Nineveh. He ended up being in the belly of the fish for 3 days and 3 nights. 3 nights. Well, God is telling Hosea to marry a prostitute, a woman who is not faithful. In other words, he's marrying her knowing she's not going to be faithful. Now, of course, the times are different than much different than when we are living in. Actually, it would have been more scandalous because the times were different. But so when she has these 3 children by a woman who is not faithful, and then God says, then name them. We think Shaquita is bad name, but look at this. Notice the one name, not my people. No promise, right? In other words, the idea is all of this is illustration of God's judgment. All of this. So chapter 3, verse 1 says, Then the Lord said to me, Go again, show love to a woman who was loved by another man. Did I want this? Yeah. Okay. All right, here we go. Here we go. All right. He says here, go again, show love to a woman who was loved by another man and is an adulteress. Stop. So this is the exception to the rule. Understand this. In any other circumstances, do not marry an unfaithful person, an adulteress. God would not sanction that kind of marriage. You can almost say God wouldn't bless that kind of marriage. This is an exception. God is telling the prophet to do this to show his disdain for Israel's sin, to show them their unfaithfulness. And just so we're clear, during this time, the idolatry and the sinfulness of Israel was so pervasive. This is why God is doing this. So then the Lord said to me, Go again, show love to a woman who was loved by another man, and is an adulteress, just as the Lord loves the Israelites, though they have turned to other gods and love raisin cakes. So in other words, this is their practice. They have turned to others. So the imagery is God is married to Israel, an adulteress, an unfaithful wife. He said, So I bought her for 15 shekels of silver and 5 bushels of barley. And I said to her, You must live with me many days. Don't be promiscuous or belong to any man, and I will act the same way towards you. But the Israelites must... Now let me stop. So again, keep this in mind. He's talking to a promiscuous woman. Now, let me do a little sidebar here. Because in any other kind of situation, I would counsel a person who's going to get married, you're being a fool. And I have done that in times past, where I've said to a person, don't marry that person. Not because, or in any kind of, but like this, the key is a godly person. If you're going to marry someone, here's the key. Not a perfect person. We all have to put up with faults. And, my wife put up with faults in me. I put up with faults in my wife. But she's a godly woman. I have literally counseled people and said, look, if you marry this person, it's going to cause you heartache. So again, not in this setting, but in any other setting, see that you marry someone that's not a godly person, and almost without exception, there's a tremendous amount of heartache. They look good in the beginning, they act good in the beginning, and then they turn. But you can't blame them because they were always that way. Okay? So God tells Hosea to marry this person knowing she's going to be unfaithful. And so the illustration is to show how unfaithful Israel is. So verse 4 says, "For the Israelites must live many days without king or prince, without sacrifice or sacred pillar, without the ephod, household idols. And afterwards the people of Israel will return and seek the Lord their God and David their king. They will come with all to the Lord and to his God goodness in the last days." So one of the things about the last days, at the time of this writing, this was not the last days. You could say that the last days began when Jesus appeared. Okay? And as we're going to get through and move through the writings of the prophet, we'll be able to define that we're talking about a period of time. It could be a short period of time, it could be a long period of time, but a period of time. So not just a 24-hour cycle day. The last days. Now, he says, "For Israel must live will live many days without a king or prince." Now, when we talk about this, let's kind of go back to our right here. So just to kind of show you all of these kings and priests, right? The kings here. And so you get to Hosea, which from this standpoint is about 25 years. At the time of the writing of Hosea, about 25 years, they are taken captive by Assyria, right? And then about 100 years after that, 120 years after that, Judah falls to Babylon. Now, from this time, is what Hosea is talking about, is that there will be no more king. They will live many days without a king. So there's a period of time. It just so happened this period of time now, to date, it's over 2,500 years. Now we're getting to this kind of timeline in the next study, but understand as God is looking at time, He says Israel will live without a king or a prince for many days. Okay, or the law. Notice here the law. He also says household idols. And then after this, he said, then the people of Israel return to me, seek the Lord their God and David their king. Now, this is kind of interesting because David their king. Now, would this be actual King David coming back? Or David type king? Now, I say that because David becomes the standard of king. He was a good king. He had his flaws, right? The Bathsheba incident, major flaw, major mark, major blemish on his record. But he was a king. If you take that away, that the king, he administered justice. All of Israel you would long for the days of David their king. And so now you see God making this promise that David their king, they return to David their king. Now, this is also talking about the millennial reign, which we'll get into later. The millennial reign, or the 1,000 reign of Jesus Christ, which is known as the second coming of Jesus Christ, during that period of time. Now again, we get more into that later on. But so from the time here on, Israel is going to be without a king. Now, that persists to this day. Now, even though Israel is a nation, trust me, without the aid of the Allies, they wouldn't be. And we can get into a whole lot of controversy, is that, in other words, that's not a fulfillment. What you see in the nation of Israel today, that's not a fulfillment of this prophecy. Because notice he said that the nation would return to God. The nation of Israel today has not returned to God, do not acknowledge God, And even if you want to count the um, Orthodox Jews, they reject God's salvation through Jesus Christ. That's why they're still out of covenant relationship with God. So they're still not following God. All right, guys, we'll pick this up in the next study. Don't forget to like and share this video and subscribe to BP, the Bible Perspective. And as always, if you have a thought or comment, add it to the comments section below. All comments are welcome. Till next time, I'll see you then.